Have you ever noticed that life doesn't ask for permission before it gets hard? One day, everything seems to be going according to plan. You feel motivated, hopeful, and certain about where you're headed, and then suddenly a setback, a disappointment, a loss, or a failure changes everything. And in those moments, positivity can feel almost impossible. We often think positive people are simply lucky, that they wake up every morning feeling inspired and confident no matter what's happening around them. But that's not what positivity is. Positivity isn't pretending that pain doesn't exist. It's not ignoring challenges or forcing a smile when you're struggling. Real positivity is a choice. It's the decision to believe that this chapter is not your whole story. It's trusting that even in the middle of uncertainty, difficulty, and setbacks, there is still something worth learning, something worth fighting for, and someone worth becoming. Because the people who inspire us most are not the ones who never faced dark days. They are the ones who discovered that even when life gets hard, they still have the power to choose how they respond, and that choice can change everything. Today, I want to talk about how to stay positive even when life gets hard, and why the ability to do so may be one of the most important skills we can ever develop. There is a moment in everyone's life when things stop unfolding the way they imagined. Plans fall apart, expectations go unmet, people disappoint us, opportunities disappear. We work hard for something and still don't get the result we hoped for. In those moments, our first instinct is often resistance. We argue with reality in our minds. We replay events over and over, asking ourselves why this happened, why now, and why to us. We convince ourselves that if we think about it long enough, we can somehow change what has already taken place. But reality doesn't negotiate. It doesn't pause because we're upset. It doesn't reverse course because we believe things should have happened differently. And the longer we spend fighting against what is, the more energy we lose for what comes next. Acceptance is one of the most misunderstood ideas in personal growth. Many people hear the word acceptance and assume it means surrender. They believe accepting a difficult situation means giving up on their dreams, lowering their standards, or deciding that nothing can improve. But acceptance is not about agreeing that something is fair. It is not saying that pain is good or that disappointment is welcome. Acceptance simply means acknowledging the truth as it exists in this moment. When you accept reality, you stop wasting your strength trying to rewrite the past. You stop demanding that life follow a script it never promised to follow. You stop measuring your current circumstances against an ideal version of how things should have been. Instead, you begin asking a much more powerful question. Given where I am right now, what can I do next? Think about how often people stay trapped because they refuse to accept what has happened. Someone loses a job and spends months consumed by anger over how unfair it was. A relationship ends, and they replay every conversation, hoping to find a different ending. A person experiences failure and decides their identity is permanently attached to that single moment. In each case, the struggle becomes bigger than the original event because they are carrying two burdens instead of one. They are carrying the challenge itself and the emotional weight of resisting the fact that it exists. Acceptance removes that second burden. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm. You can scream at the wind, complain about the rain, and wish for clear skies, but the storm continues regardless of your frustration. The moment you recognize that the storm is here, you can finally start looking for shelter, adjusting your path, and finding ways to move forward safely. Acceptance doesn't make the storm disappear. It simply allows you to respond wisely instead of reacting emotionally. Life becomes much harder when we attach our happiness to the belief that everything must go according to plan. The truth is that uncertainty is part of being human. There will always be circumstances beyond our control. Markets change, health changes, relationships evolve, people leave, new responsibilities emerge. Unexpected setbacks arrive without warning. If positivity depends on perfect conditions, then positivity becomes fragile because perfect conditions rarely last. People who remain hopeful during difficult seasons often share one important habit. They don't spend all their energy asking why life betrayed them. They understand that setbacks are not evidence that life is against them. They recognize that difficult experiences are part of the journey. Everyone travels in one form or another. They allow themselves to feel sadness, disappointment, and frustration, but they do not build a permanent home inside those emotions. Accepting reality also requires honesty. Sometimes we avoid acceptance because the truth is uncomfortable. Maybe we stayed too long in a situation that was unhealthy. Maybe we ignored warning signs because we wanted a different outcome. Maybe we expected people to become someone they never intended to be. Acceptance asks us to look directly at what is happening without distortion. It encourages us to replace wishful thinking with clarity. Clarity can feel painful at first, but it eventually becomes liberating. When you stop pretending a problem doesn't exist, you gain the ability to solve it. When you stop chasing an old version of your life, you create space for a new version to emerge. When you acknowledge that certain chapters have ended, you give yourself permission to begin writing new ones. Hope plays an essential role in this process. Acceptance without hope can become resignation. Hope without acceptance can become denial. The healthiest mindset combines both. It says, I recognize that today is difficult, but I also believe tomorrow can be different. It says, I acknowledge what I have lost, but I refuse to believe that loss is all I have left. It says, I may not have chosen this situation, but I still have the ability to choose my response. Holding on to hope does not mean expecting instant transformation. It means trusting that progress is possible even when evidence is limited. It means believing that growth often happens quietly and gradually. Seeds spend time beneath the surface before anyone sees signs of life. Muscles strengthen through repeated resistance. Character develops through experiences we would never voluntarily choose. Some of the strongest, wisest, and most compassionate people become that way not because life protected them from hardship, but because they learned to face hardship honestly. They stopped asking reality to become easier and started asking themselves how they could become more resilient. They discovered that peace begins the moment they stop fighting battles against things that cannot be changed and start investing their energy into the possibilities that still remain. When life becomes difficult, one of the fastest ways to lose positivity is to focus all of our attention on things we cannot control. We worry about people's opinions, uncertain outcomes, unexpected events, economic changes, mistakes from the past, and possibilities that may never even happen. Our minds naturally search for certainty. But life rarely offers complete certainty. The more we try to control everything around us, the more frustrated, anxious, and exhausted we become. There's an important difference between influence and control. We can influence many things through our actions, our preparation, and our attitude, but we cannot guarantee every result. We can prepare for an interview, but we cannot force an employer to hire us. We can love someone deeply, but we cannot make another person stay. We can work hard toward a goal, but we cannot eliminate every obstacle that might appear along the way. We can do our best to stay healthy, but we cannot predict every challenge our bodies may face. Many people spend years carrying emotional burdens that were never theirs to carry. They replay conversations in their minds, wishing they had chosen different words. They constantly think about what others may be saying about them. They become consumed by events taking place in distant places, situations involving people they cannot change, or outcomes that remain uncertain. Their energy becomes scattered in 100 different directions, leaving very little strength for the things that truly need their attention. Positivity becomes difficult when we feel powerless. But often, we feel powerless because we are looking in the wrong place. We search for security in external circumstances, believing we can only feel peaceful once everything is settled, predictable, and perfect. The problem is that waiting for perfect conditions means placing our emotional well, being in the hands of factors we do not control. Imagine trying to steer a boat while constantly attempting to command the weather. You become angry when the wind changes direction. You panic when waves appear. You complain about the clouds because they interfere with your plans. Eventually, you become so focused on controlling the ocean that you forget the one thing you actually have authority over: how you sail the boat. You can adjust your sails. You can strengthen your skills. You can decide whether to move forward, pause, or seek shelter. But demanding calm seas at all times only creates unnecessary suffering. One of the most empowering questions we can ask during difficult moments is, what is within my control right now? The answer is often simpler than we expect. We can control how we speak to ourselves. We can control whether we get out of bed and take care of our responsibilities. We can control how we spend the next hour. We can control whether we learn from setbacks or allow them to define us. We can control the effort we put into our work, the habits we practice each day, and the values we choose to live by. Even in situations where options seem limited, there is almost always a decision available to us. We may not control the challenge itself, but we can influence our response. We can decide whether to approach difficulties with curiosity or resentment. We can decide whether to seek support or isolate ourselves. We can decide whether to dwell on worst-case scenarios or focus on practical steps that move us forward. This shift in perspective changes the relationship we have with adversity. Instead of seeing ourselves as victims of every circumstance, we begin seeing ourselves as participants in our own growth. Challenges stop feeling like evidence that life is unfair and start becoming opportunities to practice resilience, patience, discipline, and courage. There is a reason why some people remain steady during periods of uncertainty. It is not because they avoid problems or possess extraordinary luck. It is because they have trained themselves to direct their attention toward actions rather than fears. While others become overwhelmed by possibilities they cannot predict, they focus on tasks they can complete today. They understand that progress rarely comes from worrying about an entire year at once. It often comes from making one good decision, then another, and then another. Our thoughts deserve careful management because they influence how we experience reality. If we repeatedly focus on things beyond our reach, our minds begin to believe that we are trapped. We become emotionally drained without making any meaningful progress. But when we redirect our attention toward manageable actions, we regain a sense of agency. We remember that even small efforts matter. A person recovering from failure may not control how quickly opportunities return, but they can update their skills, expand their network, and continue showing up with consistency. Someone dealing with heartbreak cannot control another person's feelings, but they can invest in healing, reconnect with supportive friends, and rediscover interests that bring meaning to their lives. A person facing uncertainty about the future cannot predict every outcome, but they can prepare, adapt, and continue moving forward despite unanswered questions. The goal is not to ignore difficult realities or pretend uncertainty does not exist. The goal is to avoid surrendering our peace to things that operate outside our influence. Worry often disguises itself as productivity, but worrying about what we cannot change rarely improves our situation. It simply consumes energy that could have been used to build something valuable. Every day presents countless opportunities to reclaim control over our mindset. We can choose gratitude instead of comparison. We can choose discipline instead of procrastination. We can choose meaningful conversations instead of endless complaints. We can choose rest when our bodies need recovery and effort when our goals require commitment. We can choose to keep our promises to ourselves even when motivation fades. Focusing on what we can control does not guarantee an easy life, but it creates a foundation of stability that remains available regardless of circumstances. It reminds us that while we may not direct every event that enters our lives, we still possess the ability to direct our attention, shape our habits, and decide who we become in response to the challenges placed before us. Most people do not struggle because difficult experiences happen to them. They struggle because of the meaning they attach to those experiences. Two people can go through the exact same setback and walk away with completely different perspectives. One person sees failure as proof that they are not talented enough, not smart enough, or not deserving of success. The other person sees the same failure as feedback, as information, as an opportunity to adjust their approach and become stronger. The event itself may be identical, but the story they tell themselves about that event changes everything. The way we interpret challenges has a profound impact on our ability to remain positive when life becomes hard. We often assume that circumstances create our emotions, but in many cases, it is our interpretation of circumstances that determines how we feel. When we automatically label every obstacle as a disaster, every rejection as a permanent defeat, and every delay as evidence that life is working against us, we make suffering heavier than it already is. Reframing challenges does not mean pretending painful experiences are enjoyable. It does not mean smiling through heartbreak, ignoring disappointment, or convincing yourself that every difficult moment is secretly wonderful. Pain is real. Loss hurts. Failure can be discouraging. Uncertainty can feel overwhelming. Reframing simply means choosing to look beyond the immediate discomfort and asking whether there is another way to understand what is happening. Many of the experiences that shape our character are not experiences we would voluntarily choose. Very few people wake up hoping to face rejection, financial struggles, criticism, loneliness, or setbacks. Yet when we look back at our own lives, we often discover that periods of hardship taught us lessons we could not have learned any other way. They forced us to develop patience when we wanted instant results. They taught us discipline when motivation disappeared. They revealed strengths we never knew we possessed. Think about how people learn to become resilient. Resilience is not built during easy seasons. It is developed during moments when we feel uncertain, discouraged, and tempted to give up. A person who has never experienced adversity may have confidence, but they have not yet tested that confidence. It is through challenges that confidence transforms into trust in oneself. We begin to understand that even if we fall, we can recover. Even if plans change, we can adapt. Even if one chapter closes, another chapter can begin. One of the reasons challenges feel so painful is because they often clash with our expectations. We create mental pictures of how our lives should unfold. We imagine success arriving on schedule. We expect relationships to last forever. We assume our efforts will always produce immediate rewards. When reality does not match those expectations, disappointment follows. We start asking questions such as, why is this happening to me? Or what did I do to deserve this? But a more empowering question might be, what is this experience trying to teach me? That question shifts our focus from victimhood to growth. Instead of viewing ourselves as people being punished by life, we begin seeing ourselves as individuals being shaped by experiences. A failed project may teach us better planning. A rejected opportunity may encourage us to improve our skills. A difficult conversation may reveal unhealthy patterns we need to change. Even painful endings can create space for healthier beginnings. History is filled with examples of individuals who transformed setbacks into opportunities for growth. Many successful entrepreneurs experienced repeated failures before building thriving businesses. Writers faced countless rejections before publishing books that inspired millions. Athletes endured injuries, defeats, and criticism before reaching their highest achievements. Their success was not the result of avoiding difficulties. It was the result of learning how to use difficulties as fuel for improvement. Reframing challenges also helps us avoid becoming trapped in temporary emotions. During difficult moments, our feelings often convince us that our current situation will last forever. If we fail, we feel like failures. If we are lonely, we believe we will always be lonely. If we experience uncertainty, we assume clarity will never return. But emotions are not permanent conditions. They are responses to present circumstances. They change as circumstances change, and they change as we grow. There is a difference between saying, I failed, and saying, I am a failure. The first statement describes an event. The second statement defines an identity. When people attach their identity to setbacks, they unintentionally limit their future. They begin acting as though their worst moments reveal their true worth. Reframing allows us to separate who we are from what happened to us. It reminds us that mistakes are experiences, not definitions. Challenges often redirect us toward paths we never considered. Sometimes the opportunity we desperately wanted was not the opportunity we actually needed. Sometimes closed doors protect us from situations that would have drained our energy or prevented us from discovering something more meaningful. Looking back, many people realized that what initially appeared to be a devastating setback eventually became a turning point that led them toward deeper fulfillment. This perspective does not remove pain, but it changes our relationship with pain. Instead of seeing adversity as an enemy whose only purpose is to harm us, we begin to see it as a demanding teacher. Teachers do not always provide comfortable lessons. Some lessons arrive through struggle, uncertainty, and repeated attempts. Yet those lessons often stay with us longer because they require effort to understand. Growth rarely feels exciting while it is happening. Most growth feels uncomfortable because it asks us to leave familiar patterns behind. It challenges our assumptions, exposes our weaknesses, and stretches our abilities beyond what feels safe. But every challenge carries the possibility of revealing a stronger, wiser, and more capable version of ourselves if we are willing to search for meaning within the experience and allow difficulty to become a source of transformation rather than a reason to stop moving forward. One of the biggest threats to staying positive during difficult times is not always the challenge itself. Sometimes it is the environment we allow ourselves to remain in while facing that challenge. When life becomes hard, our minds become more vulnerable. We begin searching for answers, explanations, and reassurance. During these moments, the voices we listen to, the information we consume, and the people we spend time with have a powerful influence on our thoughts, emotions, and beliefs. The human mind is constantly absorbing information. It does not simply process experiences that happen directly to us. It also responds to stories we hear, Conversations we participate in, headlines we read, videos we watch, and opinions shared by others. If we continuously surround ourselves with negativity, criticism, fear, and hopelessness, it becomes increasingly difficult to maintain a positive outlook, regardless of how strong our intentions may be. Many people underestimate the impact of their daily mental diet. They are careful about what they eat because they understand that unhealthy food affects their physical health. Yet they consume endless amounts of toxic content without considering how it affects their emotional well-being. They wake up and immediately check disturbing news updates. They scroll through social media feeds filled with arguments, comparisons, complaints, and unrealistic portrayals of success. They spend hours listening to people who constantly predict failure, criticize others, and focus only on what is wrong with the world. Eventually, this information begins to shape their perception of reality. They start believing that everyone is unhappy, that success is impossible, that trust is dangerous, and that hope is naive. Their minds become trained to notice problems more quickly than possibilities. They expect disappointment because disappointment has become the dominant message they consume. Protecting your mind from negative influences does not mean pretending problems do not exist. It does not require avoiding all difficult conversations or refusing to acknowledge genuine challenges. Being informed and aware is important. However, there is a difference between staying informed and becoming emotionally overwhelmed by a constant stream of negativity. There is a difference between understanding reality and allowing fear to dominate every thought. Consider the people you spend the most time around. Conversations shape beliefs. If you regularly interact with individuals who complain about everything, dismiss every opportunity, and criticize anyone trying to improve their lives, their mindset can gradually affect your own. Negativity is often contagious because people naturally mirror the attitudes and emotions of those around them. When someone repeatedly says that hard work never pays off, that dreams are unrealistic, or that life only gets worse, hearing those messages often enough can make them feel true, even when evidence suggests otherwise. At the same time, surrounding yourself with encouraging people does not mean seeking individuals who ignore reality or offer false reassurance. Positive influences are not people who claim everything will magically work out. They are people who acknowledge difficulties while still believing in growth, effort, and possibility. They challenge you to become better without making you feel incapable. They remind you of your strengths when self-doubt becomes overwhelming. They provide perspective when emotions cloud your judgment. Social media presents another challenge. While these platforms can educate, inspire, and connect people, they can also create unrealistic expectations. During difficult seasons, it is easy to compare your struggles to someone else's highlight reel. You may see people celebrating achievements, traveling to exciting destinations, buying new possessions, or appearing constantly happy. Meanwhile, you may be dealing with uncertainty, financial stress, or emotional pain. Comparison then convinces you that everyone else is moving forward while you remain stuck. The truth is that most people share carefully selected moments of their lives. Rarely do they show sleepless nights, private disappointments, failed attempts, or moments of insecurity. Comparing your full reality to another person's edited presentation creates unnecessary suffering. Protecting your mind means recognizing when certain content leaves you feeling discouraged, inadequate, or emotionally drained, and having the courage to limit your exposure to it. The language we use with ourselves also deserves attention because our inner dialogue can become one of the strongest negative influences we face. Many people speak to themselves with a level of harshness they would never direct toward a friend. They replay mistakes repeatedly. They criticize every weakness. They focus exclusively on what they lack rather than acknowledging progress they have already made. They assume one setback predicts future failure. Imagine carrying around a person who constantly whispers discouraging comments in your ear. Every time you try something new, they remind you of previous failures. Every time you experience success, they tell you it was only luck. Every time you make a mistake, they question your worth. Over time, even the most determined person would begin losing confidence. Unfortunately, many individuals become that voice for themselves. Protecting your mind requires becoming aware of these patterns and intentionally replacing destructive messages with more balanced perspectives. Instead of saying, "I always fail," you might remind yourself that everyone experiences setbacks while learning. Instead of saying, "Nothing ever changes," you can acknowledge small improvements that often go unnoticed. Instead of focusing exclusively on obstacles, you can recognize resources, skills, and opportunities that still remain available. Books, podcasts, speeches, meaningful conversations, and time spent reflecting can also become powerful tools for strengthening the mind. Just as negativity influences us, encouragement influences us as well. Listening to stories of resilience reminds us that difficult seasons are not unique to our own journey. Learning from people who overcame challenges helps expand our understanding of what is possible. Reading ideas that promote wisdom, discipline, and perspective provides our minds with healthier material to process. The goal is not to build a life free from all negative influences, because that is impossible. Criticism will still appear. Disappointments will still happen. Unpleasant news will still exist. The goal is to become intentional about what occupies the majority of your mental space. When you learn to guard your attention, choose supportive environments, question destructive thoughts, and fill your mind with messages that encourage growth and resilience, you create conditions that make it easier to remain hopeful and emotionally steady even during some of the most challenging periods of your life. There are moments in life when pain feels meaningless. We work hard and still fail. We give our best to people who walk away. We sacrifice, wait, struggle, and wonder why our efforts do not seem to produce the outcomes we hoped for. During these seasons, positivity becomes difficult because the mind naturally asks one question above all others: what is the point of continuing? Human beings can endure tremendous hardship when they believe there's a reason behind their struggle. Physical exhaustion becomes easier to tolerate when it serves an important goal. Sacrifices feel more meaningful when they contribute to something greater than immediate comfort. Challenges become less overwhelming when we understand that they are connected to values, relationships, dreams, or responsibilities that genuinely matter to us. The problem is that many people search for happiness as their primary destination. They believe that if they can avoid discomfort, collect enough achievements, gain approval from others, or create perfect circumstances, they will finally feel fulfilled. But happiness is often temporary. It changes with circumstances. It rises and falls depending on events, expectations, and emotions. Purpose operates differently. Purpose provides direction even when emotions fluctuate. It gives people a reason to continue moving forward when motivation disappears. Purpose does not have to involve changing the entire world or becoming famous. For some people, purpose is being a caring parent who provides stability for their children. For others, it is building a meaningful career, serving a community, helping those in need, creating art, pursuing knowledge, or becoming a person whose actions reflect deeply held values. Purpose can be found in small commitments that are repeated consistently over time. When life becomes difficult, people often lose sight of these commitments because pain narrows attention. We become consumed by immediate problems. We focus so intensely on what we have lost that we stop noticing what still remains. We begin measuring our lives solely through the lens of disappointment. The future appears empty because we are evaluating it based on present emotions rather than enduring values. Finding purpose during difficult times requires asking different questions. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" we can ask, "Who do I want to become through this experience?" Instead of asking, "What has life taken away from me?" we can ask, "What responsibilities, relationships, and opportunities still deserve my attention?" These questions shift our focus away from helplessness and toward contribution. Pain often convinces people that they have nothing valuable left to offer. Someone who loses a job may begin believing their skills no longer matter. A person experiencing heartbreak may conclude they are unworthy of love. Someone facing repeated setbacks may assume their dreams are unrealistic. But purpose reminds us that our value does not disappear because circumstances change. Difficult seasons may affect our confidence, but they do not erase our ability to contribute, learn, support others, and continue growing. Many people discover their deepest sense of purpose precisely because they endured hardship. Individuals who experienced loneliness sometimes become compassionate friends who ensure others never feel abandoned. Those who struggled financially may become mentors who help others build stability. People who overcame personal obstacles often develop empathy that allows them to connect with others in meaningful ways. Experiences that once seemed purely painful can eventually become sources of wisdom and service. Purpose also provides structure during chaos. When uncertainty dominates life, routines connected to meaningful goals create stability. A teacher continues preparing lessons because students depend on guidance. A parent wakes up each morning because children need care and encouragement. An artist keeps creating because self-expression remains important regardless of external recognition. Someone pursuing personal growth continues learning because becoming a better version of themselves matters deeply. Without purpose, challenges can feel random and unbearable. Every obstacle appears to be evidence that life is unfair. Every setback becomes another reason to stop trying. But when people connect their actions to a meaningful reason, obstacles begin to look different. They become difficulties encountered while traveling towards something important rather than signs that the journey should end. Purpose does not eliminate sadness. People with strong purpose still grieve losses, feel discouraged, and experience moments of doubt. The difference is that purpose gives them something to return to when emotions become overwhelming. It acts like a compass. A compass does not remove mountains, storms, or rough terrain. It simply helps travelers remember where they are heading despite difficult conditions. There are times when purpose must be rediscovered rather than inherited. We may spend years pursuing goals that were based on external expectations. We chase approval, status, or comparisons because we assume these things will provide lasting satisfaction. Then adversity arrives and forces us to reevaluate what truly matters. We realize that certain ambitions no longer align with our values. We recognize that relationships deserve more attention than achievements. We begin appreciating moments of connection, integrity, growth, and service in ways we previously overlooked. Finding purpose often begins with paying attention to simple questions. What activities make you feel useful? What values are you unwilling to compromise? Whose lives improve because you exist? What problems do you care enough about to continue addressing even when progress is slow? What kind of person do you hope others remember when they think about your character? These questions encourage reflection that extends beyond temporary circumstances. Purpose rarely arrives as a dramatic revelation. More often, it emerges gradually through consistent actions. It grows when people continue showing up for responsibilities they believe in. It develops through acts of kindness, disciplined effort, meaningful conversations, and commitments that align with personal values. Over time, these actions create a sense of direction strong enough to withstand disappointment, uncertainty, and hardship because they remind us that even during difficult chapters, our lives can still carry meaning, our efforts can still benefit others, and our journey can still move towards something deeply worthwhile.